Welcome to Learnfinity Labs, where we discover new things, learn from it, and then share it to our community. Today, we will be looking at the basics of Docker. We will learn how to build an image and run it in a container. We will be setting up nginx on our local host as an example. Before we begin, I will try and explain the Docker container as best as I could. The intermodal shipping container, which was created by Malcolm McLean, has since revolutionized shipping and global trade. For years, Malcolm wondered how he could get his trucking company's entire cargo loaded onto a shipping vessel as quickly and efficiently as possible. It was an incredible invention that eliminated wasted space, but the most significant innovation is that the shipping container allowed cargo to be seamlessly transported between road, rail, and sea. Similarly, Docker Containers provides abstraction, by which your applications can easily move from one developer's laptop to another, or to a staging environment, and finally on production, with minimal setup required. Instead of you having to set up different machines for local, staging, and production environments, you can just install Docker, spin up a container, and have your applications up and running in no time. You now have your applications and servers configured exactly how it should be. You don't have to set up databases, do configurations, install libraries, extensions, or anything else. This eliminates the old adage of developers, "It works on my machine." If you have not installed Docker Desktop already, you can go to docker.com and follow their documentation on how to install it for your machine. To begin, make sure that your Docker Desktop is launched and running. Then open a terminal. We will be learning our first command to set up nginx on our local host. Type in docker pull nginx. What this will do is that it will connect to the Docker hub and look for an image called nginx, and then download it to your Docker desktop. The hub is a service provided by Docker for finding and sharing container images. Once that is done, you can check the downloaded image on your Docker desktop in the Images tab, like so. We can now run our nginx image in a container. On your terminal, input the command docker run -d -p space 8080 :80 nginx. What this will do is that it will run the image that we have. Nginx, the -d option, is for executing the command in detached mode, meaning that it will run the container in the background. The -p option is for publishing the container ports to our host machine. In this case, port 80 in our container, which is also the default port of nginx, is published to port 8080 of our host machine. Once the command is finished, let us go to our local host on port 8080. You should see the nginx welcome page. Congratulations, you now have a running Docker container. But you might be asking, now what? How do I proceed? How can I develop and create and edit HTML pages and view it in our local host? While the two commands we have done previously works great in pulling a Docker image and running it in a container, there is a better way to set up our local host environment, or any environment for that matter. Now, before we go to the next part of this tutorial, I will ask you to stop your running container and delete it, and also delete the image that we have pulled, like so. Do not worry, we will have it running up again soon. Now that we have cleared our Docker desktop, it is time to continue. For this next part, we will be using two files, Docker Compose and Dockerfile. Let us discuss first the Docker Compose file. Docker Compose is a tool for defining and running multi-container Docker applications. With Compose, you use a YAML file to configure your application's services. Then, with a single command, you create and start all the services from your configuration. To begin, create a folder anywhere on your machine and name it whatever you want. I just named mine code. Then, create a folder inside it. Again, you can name it whatever you want, but I named mine Docker. Inside this folder, create a YAML file named docker-compose.yaml. I will paste a set of instructions in our YAML file and will explain it to you what every line does. The first line tells what version of Docker Compose file version we are going to use. I just set mine to 3. You can check out the Docker documentation for more information. The next line is services that we want to use. As you may have guessed, you can have multiple services in here that will have its own containers and configurations run side by side with no issues at all. As an example, you can add PHP in MySQL and have nginx set up as a reverse proxy server for your PHP application. But we will be diving into it on our succeeding tutorials. For now, let us just stick to nginx serving static HTML pages. The build option is telling Docker Compose where to find the Docker file that will be used to build our nginx image. I will further explain this later. The ports option, as earlier described in this tutorial, is just publishing port 8080 of our host machine to port 80 of the nginx container. You can publish multiple ports if you need to. Lastly, the volumes option creates a link between one of the local folders on the host system and the folder on the Docker container. These folders have data replication, so that even if a container gets restarted or deleted at some point in time, you will not lose your files. Again, you can link multiple folders if you need to. Next, we will be creating the Docker file to tell Docker how to build our nginx image. Inside the Docker directory, create a new directory called nginx. Then inside the nginx folder, create a Docker file without a file name extension. I will again paste a set of instructions in our Docker file and will explain it to you. The first instruction, from, tells Docker what base image we will be using and its version. If you go to hub.docker.com, you can search for base images you can use to build upon, and have different versions or tag that are available to them. So what we are instructing to Docker essentially, is that we want to use the latest version of nginx. The workdir instruction sets the current working directory for subsequent instructions in the Docker file. When the workdir instruction is executed, all the subsequent instructions in the Docker file will be executed relative to the specified directory. Lastly, copy is instructing Docker to copy-paste the file from the host machine to the Docker container. Now, let's go ahead and create a simple default configuration file for nginx. I have put a simple server block for our local host server and made the location /var/www/html the root directory for our application. If you were paying attention earlier, you may have noticed that this is the location in the container when we define the volumes option in our Docker Compose YAML file. Furthermore, you may have noticed in the same volumes option, we have not created the HTML folder inside the code directory. So let's go ahead and create that folder, and, after that, we then create our simple index.html page, which will just contain a simple hello world greeting. I hope you are able to follow along as we are almost done with this tutorial. Now, on your terminal, make sure that you are inside the Docker folder we created earlier. In my case, I must be inside my code/docker directory. You can do an ls command to check if the docker-compose YAML file is present. When you are ready, type in docker-compose up-e. What this will do is that it will build the images and execute the commands you have specified in your Docker file. Then finally run those images in their respective containers. And again, -d just means to run it in detach mode. If everything went well, you should be able to go to your browser and navigate to your local host :8080, and you should be able to see our simple index.html with a hello world message. Now that we have set this up, you can now start creating and updating HTML pages and be on your way making your own websites. I really hope you enjoyed this short introduction to Docker. Please hit the like and subscribe buttons to get more of these content. And if you have any questions or feedback, please put those in the comments below.